I had the engine rebuilt on my 6.9 a couple of years ago, and I don't drive the car too much, but I got a little bit of flaring from the transmission lately, and I thought I'd change the fluids and filter on it as it hadn't been done in a few years. So, with the help of a friend, we've decided to get this sorted out. So, to drain the torque converter of the transmission, which has 4 litres of fluid in it, you need to start with this 50mm um, half-inch socket attachment, which goes into the pulley and over the crank bolt. So in this engine bay, it's always very awkward doing pretty much anything. Getting this in there, making sure it's on, and this enables you to turn the torque converter to get access to the drainage plug. If you're a rookie like me, it sort of doesn't make too much sense till you see what's going on. So just chucking the camera in there to show how that's seated there. So now you start to turn the torque converter by rotating that wrench and socket clockwise to bring the drain plug into view, and bit by bit you'll see it gradually come into sight. So the drainage plug's coming into view, which is a 5mm Allen attachment, and there we go. So we now have access to drain this fluid. So I've got the 5 on there, I've got it finger loose. So now I'm just undoing that drainage bolt, and not a particularly clean aspect of the job, but you can see the red transmission fluid coming out. Nothing too nasty there. So we're now looking at the sump. Now, unfortunately, the way my hoist is with the scissor lift, I didn't realise I'd put the cross member in an awkward area, but I still had access to do what I needed to do. And there's 2 lines on there, and then the 4 bolts for the actual sump in itself. So there's a 19 at the back there for that hard line. And so just undoing this one. So then getting that off, and the red transmission fluid is coming out, and this is the residual oil that we're going to need. So a fluid change is usually about 8 litres or 7.9 litres according to the manual with the torque converter. So ideally, if you have a bucket that measures the volume, you can check that you're pretty much on the money. So moving on to the other drainage line, and I can't remember if this was a 17 or a 19 at the front here. This has got a banjo bolt in it with 2 washers, and so your transmission filter kit should include those 2 washers. So again, I didn't think about the mounting there, and all tripped out over that. So there's the banjo. And so then we've just got these 13mm bolts in each quarter, and they've got these little metal brackets. Just be careful if they're flying onto the ground, or I wouldn't want to try this lying on my back, so I'm lucky to have a hoist access. So we just undo the 413s. So the sump's ready to come off there, and again my positioning of that hoist utility did not help, but eventually we got the sump off. Now you can see the residual red oil in there, and the little filter inside the pan. All the oil's looking red, there's no debris in there, so just giving this a bit of a degreasing and a cleanup. If it wasn't in the middle of the night when I was doing this, I probably would have given that a coat of paint. So just giving it a bit of a tidy up there. So the manual makes reference to a 7.9 litre amount of transmission oil in the fluid change. There's our brake cleaned pan with the new seal on. And this is the old filter, which was a vaico filter, and I've replaced it with another vaico filter. I didn't know that at the time. I'm not sure how many people make these filters. And so just a couple of Phillips screws on there to get this off. So here's a new filter kit from Vaico, and the part number from Vaico was V30-0456. That's a V30-0456, and that comes with the seal and the 2 crush washers that you need to replace this. So there's our new filter, and you can see this just getting slotted back on now with the 2 Phillips screws. So now basically just putting everything back together, which is rather unremarkable. And we've got those 4 13mm bolts in the quarter. Remember to have put the brackets on. And just for completeness, and I'm sorry, it's probably a tad boring, just showing you all those bolts going back on and getting tightened up. And then we have to put that pipe on with the 2 crush washers. So one on top and one underneath the line, but you can see the banjo bolt there. So there's one above the pipe and one below, getting tightened up there. I'm sorry, I don't know the torque figure for that one. Tight is the answer, not too tight. And there's our 19mm hard line getting secured back on as well. Now this is where you need a second set of hands pouring the fluid in. So I've got the liquimoly 80F fluid, which is a Dexron 2.3 equivalent, and it's an MB approval 236.1, which I think is reasonable for our cars as far as I can find. So down the dipstick tube, we've put in the first 4 litres with the engine running, because you need to circulate that fluid into the torque converter. And so this is where you need a second set of hands, because the dipstick tube for the transmission filter on the right side is very narrow, and you'll otherwise spill oil onto a hot exhaust and get nice and smoky. So the car's running, and after being on the hoist, it's now pumped itself up, which is great in the 6.9. So after the first 4 litres or so, technically another 3.9 litres should go in, and then run the engine to circulate it, and then you check it with the dipstick, which should be between the 2 markings with the engine running. And you can see there should be 2 marks there. There we go. And to be honest, I probably put in a little bit too much there, and I might actually get a pump on there to just take a little bit out, because you don't want to overfill these things. So we should be good to go now. So starting the car up, you can then chuck the car into reverse and drive and check that it bites and everything seems in order. And so just chucking it into reverse, you'll feel the car bite down. There we go. And then chucking it into drive. Similarly, the car I want to take forward. So I'm confident that we've done a good change.